to think of how do we get renewal in our school. And I'd love you to fuel your school renewal with some wedding cake. It's a bit more expensive than the cheap petrol that's around at the moment. But when we're thinking about renewal, we need to think about how can we change those things? What is the language we need to put in place? And are there steps? And what are the steps that we can take? These steps are framed around the concept of a wedding cake. And the trouble is when we come back to school, not everyone will turn up at the same time in the same place. Some will take their time and drag their feet, and it'll take a bit of prompting to get them to move. And some will be back quick but late. And the hard part is we've just got to try to get the impetus to make a movement and to make that movement different from what it was. We'd like to think that every kid who comes back to school and every teacher who comes back to school and every parent who brings their child to school looks as happy as this kid and is prepared and ready to go. But the truth is, not all weddings go well. Not all marriages are equal. What we want to do is try and marry everyone's hopes and dreams and desires together into a great future. Wedding cakes are interesting things. Kate and I never managed to get a wedding cake. We had been through Cyclone Tracy just 2 weeks before we got married, and we lost everything in the cyclone, everything we had. But that was great because it enabled us to start all over again. We never had enough money to buy a wedding cake, and so 45 years later, we're still waiting to get one. But if you build things with the right foundations, you can achieve great things. And I still love Kate with all my heart, 45 years later. So it's bigger than just the cake itself. It's the spirit that we use. If kids build a wedding cake, I think it'd look a bit like this. But the trouble is when we build our school wedding cake with Lego, there's too many little pieces to be involved with. Today I want to kind of simplify that journey, but warn you, not always. Sometimes the cake lasts longer than the marriage does. I think a bit like this one.
There's some cardboard. Go above the cardboard. There's the piece of cardboard. You have to go right above the cardboard.
There is a feeling that this marriage isn't going to last, or if it does, it's going to be pretty volatile. When we look at what we serve up to our kids, we've got a problem, because the trouble is kids can't come back to all cake. They need something nutritious, and we need something that's worthwhile for everyone, not just the kids. What happens is with it is we've got to figure out what are the things that are nutritious and will keep us and sustain us into the future. And when we look at what we need to sustain us, the first bottom layer of the wedding cake, I believe in constructing schools, it's pretty simple. It's that basic safe emotional environment. It's that chance to grow. And when that chance is a safe emotional environment that you can see physically, then schools grow well. This means we should see things like smiles and welcomes and stuff like that. Google, in a research project called Project Aristotle, looked at what makes great teams work. And everything they'd said came down to two things. It didn't matter who was in the team or what they did, that the two biggest things that made teams work were, first, equality of conversational turn-taking. That means that everybody was listened to when they spoke. And what happens with that is that everybody got a voice. When everybody gets a chance to speak and they're both valued, because the next part of it was called ostentatious listening. Ostentatious listening is when somebody spoke, you showed them that you were listening. You put things out of your hands, you looked at them and you valued them. Those two things bring what they call psychological safety. Psychological safety enables us to build a school and a place to work where people are able to show their best ideas and to work together and get the best out of each other. The next level up from safe emotional environment is that the trust that you build from the safe emotional environment enables us to have positive relationships. In all of the schools that I've worked with, there's always around about 4 different types of relationship that go on at school. The first one is the withdrawal relationships. And we've got about 50,000 kids in Australia who are withdrawing from school constantly, who are not motivated, who aren't engaged, and who don't turn up as often as they should. They're not going to be improved by 3 or 4 months of social isolation. And so when we look at these kids, we've got to think about how does this withdrawal affect them? Usually these kids are playing lose-lose. And we have some teachers who do this as well. They're the people who you can't remember whether they're at work today or not. Lose-lose means that we have low relationships and low goals. It means that you're hard to motivate. It means that you're passive, that you sit back and wait things to happen, and it's driven by fear. And fear is a problem because when we look at fear, it's the anticipation of pain. It's not the pain itself. And it happens when we're not doing things. What happens also is that we'll have another group who are called the force group. The force group want things done their way. And when they come back, they'll be saying, this is what I want. They want win, lose. They put things in simple ways of, they make it about you and I, black and white, true or false. The problem with win-lose is that high relationships aren't the major factor. It's high goals. It's getting what I want. And it's aggressive. It's in your face. And the difficulty with this is that it's a power game. And you'll know you're in a power game with anyone because you feel threatened. And I know some schools where the kids have got the power and not the school. The next level of relationships are the smooth relationships. This is the vast majority of relationships in schools. These are lose-win. On the surface, people seem nice. They seem to think that you're important. They seem to think that that things are great. But underneath it, they want high relationships, but they want low goals. They really don't want to do a lot of work. The difficulty here is that they're passive-aggressive and they triangulate a lot. In other words, when they don't like something, they don't come and talk to you, they talk to someone else. And when they talk to someone else, nobody solves the problem. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And more people get engaged in the problem instead of simply dealing directly with one person. This is driven by control and it's very manipulative. And often people will cry, I can't do anything, I've got no power here. But usually they're using their lack of power as a need to control, their way to be able to make other people feel bad, to do things for them. Where we need to be the most is in the problem-solving sphere. And the problem-solving sector is kind of interesting because it talks in a language that no one understands. It's called win-win. Whenever we are in win-win, and we've had to have a win-win situation in Australia to deal with the COVID virus, meaning we have to stay home and give up our need to socially contact people to save other people's lives. And so if we have to share in a very different way, and it seems to have worked, and it's worked brilliantly. But in many countries around the world, the other 3 areas, the passive-aggressive, and the outright aggressive, keep dragging us back to a win-lose situation. Well, you've either got to give up isolation or we're going to have business. And it's much more complicated than that. The win-win language means that we try to develop high relationships and high goals, that we try to come up with good stuff that we both want. It means that we have to give up something to get something better. But we also means that we get synergy. When this happens, we're assertive. We're able to tell people what we want and do it in a way that doesn't threaten them. And when we achieve it, we get pride. We get people being pleased with what is achieved. If we use the problem-solving relationships to get the best out of each other, then we build cooperation. And cooperation is relationships with rules around it. And the rules are pretty simple. If we stick to getting face-to-face, making sure we don't triangulate, that we deal directly with people, a lot more cooperation gets happening. If we have good social skills, and here we need to teach those social skills explicitly. There are 5 key social skills which I think that every school and every person needs to know. They're mutual respect, which means you don't have friends at school, but you're friendly to everyone. There's no put-downs, because the put-downs come from those other 3 types of relationships that are not always productive. Then there's be your best self. Be the absolute person who takes responsibility for you. That means 100% commitment to owning up to your own problems and your own solutions. The next one is active listening, because we know that ostentatious listening creates that safe emotional environment that we've been looking for, that psychological safety that brings us forward. And the last one is to get and give help. Getting and giving help means we have to share our thinking, which is the 3rd part of cooperation. If you share your thinking and a metacognition goes through the roof, then people know what's required and they know how to help and work together. We also know that when we work together, the team makes the dream. And when we get that working together, we get individual accountability, that we're not only are we part of a team, but we are individually held accountable for our performance as well. These 3 things give us consistency. When we draw these things together, we get that consistent message of how we're going to work. But there's a difficulty here. These things are often seen by schools, by businesses, often by families, as to be in the way, time-consuming, get in the process of detract from the process of learning. The trouble is that when we come to the next big level, which is teaching and learning, if we do not look after those bottom 3 layers, we have a problem. And the problem goes like this. We put too much teaching and learning emphasis on our relationships, and our relationships and the cooperation gets less and less, and the environment becomes less safe, and the cooperation gets less involved as well. And so instead of teaching and learning, we often find out that we end up with a huge amount of teaching. And everybody's heard this. They've probably done this to your kids in social isolation. You say, how many times do I have to tell you this? We've been through this a million times. Weren't you listening? And how many times have we had it at school when we say to kids, oh, but we've been through this 100 times. Why haven't you learnt it? The truth is that we probably didn't build those relationships that made them want to listen. And if we look at this, we need to reverse that. We need to put learning in perspective and engage kids in the teaching. In fact, in the best schools, most of the teaching is very minor. The learning is huge, and the students are involved in doing the teaching. And the reason why that's important is because our goals in the last part of it, the purpose for why we come to school, is to help kids develop their hopes and their dreams and their wishes and their desires. These big, hairy, audacious goals, as Jim Collins called it a long time ago. These hopes, dreams, wishes and desires are the stuff that drives learning. The research done on student voice shows us that if a teacher or a school knows what their kids' hopes, dreams, desires and wishes are, and the students know that, the kids are 17 times more likely to be engaged with academic pursuits. 17 times. That means that we have to align all of these things towards our purposes and goals. And then the light will come on. And that light is the happiness that happens from when you turn up to a school. That thing when you walk in each day and you're so pleased to be here, and you had a chance to make a difference and touch the future. With this, if we build this with our students, they grow that light themselves. And each day you wake up, you just want to go to work. And it's a new day and great things happen. We've got to learn to use the wedding cake to build a cake that we are truly proud of. To have that thought of exploration, just like this little tot.
I would like cookie dough today. Making cake. You're ready! I'm ready. Cheese. Okay. Let's see. This chocolate. The cookies. This. What's the best? What's your piece? I hold that. Hello. Hello. It's for me.